Hello, my name is Peter Dunn, and today I will be analyzing a documentary titled Beyond Standing Rock from the Shocks and Doc YouTube channel through the lens of standpoint theory. Standpoint theory was initially championed by the American philosopher named Sandra Harding to answer the question of how people's worldviews are ultimately formed. To answer this question, she came up with the concept of standpoints. Standpoints represent where a person is in the world, socially as opposed to physically. Just as an ant and a human have radically different perspectives on the world because of their size, inequalities lead to differing perspectives because of where a person is in the social hierarchy. What results from comparing two different perspectives using this theory is a consistent relationship between power and knowledge. This relationship is ultimately the foundational concept of standpoint theory, and is what makes it useful when looking at how groups from different social standings could have such different perspectives. Sandra Harding herself argues on page 448 of the textbook Cultural Context that, quote, when people speak from the opposite sides of power relationships, the perspective from the lives of the less powerful can provide a more objective view than the perspective from the lives of the more powerful, end quote. This concept is then expanded upon by Julia Wood, a communication professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and another major proponent of standpoint theory. Page 448 of the textbook Cultural Context quotes her as saying that when she, quote, regards all perspectives as partial, but she insists that some standpoints are more partial than others, since different locations within social hierarchies affect what is likely to be seen. End quote. The central idea that those from a lower social location have more accurate, albeit still incomplete, concept of the world does make sense. Not only do the disenfranchised have to contend with the realities of their own world, but they must also contend with the will of all those with power above them. This reality is referred to as situated knowledge within the framework of the theory. This dynamic of power and knowledge, and many of the concepts found within standpoint theory, are on full display with the feud between the Standing Rock Indian Reservation and the powerful state and company actors trying to build an oil pipeline through lands near their tribal territory. In this example, it is the Standing Rock tribe that represents the marginalized party. Their standpoint on their Dakota Access Pipeline reveals knowledge and a worldview that is unknowable to those in positions of power over them. In the documentary Beyond Standing Rock, between the 2024 and 2033 minute mark, a tribal member definitively states their standpoint as, quote, our lands were illegally taken from us. They've been developing what they call resources. They've been exploiting our land off the backs of our people. End quote. Not only does this reflect the standpoint of the tribe, but it also represents what standpoint theory refers to as local knowledge. The textbook Cultural Context on page 452 defines local knowledge as being, quote, situated in time, place, experience, and relative power, as opposed to knowledge from nowhere that's supposedly value free. End quote. Again, this standpoint is not claiming a universal truth, but rather a more realistic truth that can only be seen given the tribe's specific position in history and society. The cultural knowledge on display from the standpoint of the Standing Rock tribe could be broken down into two parts. First and foremost, they view the introduction of an oil pipeline through their lands as an existential crisis for their very survival. Early in the documentary, at the 120 mark, you could hear a tribal member express that, quote, water is life. Water gives life to anything that has a spirit, end quote. Secondly, they have a long history of what results from consultation between Indian tribes and American entities. At the 1503 mark of the documentary, the chairman of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe states that, quote, every time we didn't agree with what they were doing, but that's not heard. So we don't get listened to. We don't get heard. Check off the box. We talk to the tribe. End quote. From their standpoint, they see that consultation is ultimately being used to legitimate decisions that have already been made. In contrast, the pipeline company and American government entities clearly are the parties in a position of power in this dispute. Their standpoint is demonstrated at the 1038 to 10:55 mark of the video, where a government official says, quote, "Well, that's fine, and they're entitled to their opinion, but pipeline development is legally permissible in North Dakota, and we're obligated to enforce the laws. So when a company meets the conditions set by law for a permit, they receive one." End quote. From this standpoint, the cultural knowledge produced is very evident. Legality and authority equals righteousness. From the standpoint of the standpoint of the tribe is nothing more than an obstacle to be overcome for those in power, as they see their causes being inherently justified. When looking at the actions of more powerful entities, it would be easy to assume that they arrive at their standpoints with malicious intent, that they are purposely abusing those under them. This interaction, however, highlights one of the most interesting products of standpoint theory, that the powerful are often just completely ignorant of those under them. This is shown very clearly at the 1412 to 1420 minute mark of the documentary, when a government official admits that, quote, "So I had no idea this was a concern to the Standing Rock members or the tribal council at all," end quote. The theory crafted by Julia Wood again predicts this result. She states on page 453 of the textbook Cultural Context that, quote, "Groups that are advantaged by the prevailing system have a vested interest in not perceiving social inequalities that benefit them at the expense of others." End quote. Simply put, those in power will not see the standpoints of those under them because it just simply doesn't benefit them to do so. From the interactions contained in this documentary, the validity of standpoint theory is apparent. This is why the Standing Rock Sioux, by the very virtue of being marginalized, have developed a more complete worldview of strong objectivity. They just have to contend They simply just have to contend more than those with power. As final evidence of this fact and the concept of standpoint theory, I will leave with a quote from one of the tribe members between the 412 and 425 mark of the documentary. Quote, "We've mastered your language, we've interpreted your constitution, and we know what we are defined as. And now we fully understand. I speak beautiful English. It is my weapon." End quote. Thank you very much.